Hello, I'm John and welcome to my channel Disquiet and Dragons, and in this video I'll be doing a March reading wrap up. So last month, March, was a really good reading month for me. Every single book I read I consider a 5-star read, and the first one of those that I read was Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. This book is about a boy called Fitz. He's a royal bastard. His grandfather takes him to the royal family and says, you know, chivalry fathered him, you can look after him. Chivalry's brother Verity hands Fitz off to Burrick, the stableman who was loyal to chivalry, and basically tasks him with bringing Fitz up. The book tells the story of Fitz over a few years, of how he grows up in the castle, the politics of what goes on, and how he deals with not really fitting in perfectly with the royalty, and not really fitting in as well with like the general folk. He's kind of in between the two, and the book deals with some really interesting themes of how he finds his place and loss and loneliness, and you really do feel for Fitz. He never knew his father. He's dumped in this castle where a lot of people don't like him, and you can really feel his loneliness at times. If you haven't read anything by Robin Hobb, I can't praise her work highly enough. The character progression and development is outstanding. The world building is outstanding. Some people say that this book is a bit slow paced, but I think the excitement comes from the actual progression and seeing how Fitz grows. All in all, 5-star read every day of the week. I absolutely loved it. At the end of February and the beginning of March, I read Hyperion by Dan Simmons and Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb, and both are quite dense, heavy reads. So I thought to myself, I really wanted to read something a bit lighter in tone. So I read Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldry, and it's such a fantastic book. I started it on a Friday evening before I went to bed. I finished it by tea time on the Saturday. I read it in about a day, and it's just a wonderful, cozy, warm book. It follows our main character Viv, an orc barbarian, who one day just decides, I've had enough of the adventuring life, I'm going to open a coffee shop. So the story follows her, how she finds a building to build her coffee shop, and the friends she meets along the way. Of those friends, we meet Cal, a hob carpenter, a succubus called Tandri, and a little ratkin baker called Thimble. The book follows like their day-to-day problems. There's never anything too high stakes. It's all things that our characters can deal with. And overall, I'd say this book is mainly about making friends and finding your place in the world, finding the people that you're comfortable with and the people that make you feel like you belong. I can't recommend it highly enough. If you haven't read it, it's well worth reading. A bit of a change in tone on the next book. The next book I read was Cycle of the Werewolf by Stephen King, and probably for the first time ever, it's a book by Stephen King that I wish was longer. The story itself is really quite short. It's maybe 60-70 pages long, but it's not just the story that make it a 5-star book for me, it's the illustrations inside which are absolutely beautiful. And overall, the book is easily a 5-star from me. It's quite a clever little story. It takes place over 12 chapters. Each chapter is a month in the year, and it describes how a small town called Tarker's Mill deals with what seems to be werewolf attacks. As we follow the story throughout the 12 months of the year, each month has a werewolf attack, and as Stephen King so brilliantly does, even though it's such a short story, he brings those characters to life. As the months go by, and by the time you get back to the end of the year, you see how the town is trying to deal with the werewolf attacks, and it's another great little book. It was out of print for a long time, but it's been republished now, and it's well worth picking up. Also, the film that was based on the book, Silver Bullet, Gary Busey is crazy best in it, and it's also well worth watching. And it's back to fantasy for the next book, and that is Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Eames. This book follows our main character, Clay Cooper, who was in a group of mercenaries with 4 other guys, and they've since retired. Clay's made him a good life for himself. He's married, has a daughter, and a steady job as a guard on a wall. And one night, his old bandmate, Gabriel, knocks on his door, asking for his help as his daughter is in severe danger. The story then follows Gabriel and Clay as they go around the land trying to find their old bandmates so they can get the band back together and go and rescue Gabriel's daughter. It's just a fantastic, swashbuckling, full of action fantasy story. If you like rock or heavy metal, there's so many references. Clay Cooper, I think, is based on Alice Cooper. One of the towns is called Coverdale after the singer from Whitesnake. The wizard of the band is called Moog after the keyboard. And you've also got characters. There's a character called Fender, and there's just so many. I've probably missed so many of the references, but it's a fantastic book, really fast paced. And again, can't recommend it highly enough. Really looking forward to reading the sequel soon. The next book I read was a horror classic, and that was Rosemary's Baby by Ira Levin. It was written in 1967, and I didn't realise that it was the most popular horror novel of the 60s, and it sold well over 4 million copies. Another thing I didn't realise was even to this day in some countries it's still heavily censored. Some of it is quite dark and it's difficult to read at some points. There's some problematic behaviour going on in this book. The book follows the main character, Rosemary, and her husband, who is a struggling actor. They've just moved into a building called the Bromford Building, and after moving in they meet some of the neighbours who are a bit eccentric, and for some reason all of a sudden after moving to the Bromford Building, Guy suddenly starts picking up acting roles and he starts getting these big breaks, and Rosemary and Guy decide that they're going to try for a baby. And when Rosemary becomes pregnant, all the neighbours in the building seem to take a real interest in her pregnancy, and it's quite disturbing the lengths that they go to make sure that Rosemary has the pregnancy that they want her to have. Considering the age of the book, it was written in 1967, it is really quite dark, and a lot of the subject matter, it comes into the modern day quite well. It doesn't feel like an old book. There's you can tell that Rosemary gets gaslighted a lot, and it's a shame because she's quite a likeable character, and you can tell that she's been treated so badly by all these people in the book. If you are going to read it, I suggest you look for content warnings because it goes quite dark in some places, but if you can deal with that, it's another 5-star book. The final 2 books that I read last month I haven't actually got physical copies of, as I listened to them on Audible, and that was the Mon and Robot series by Becky Chambers. I'd listened to them before, and they're some of my all-time favourites. A Psalm for the Wild Bill is my favourite of the two, and it's about sibling Dex, who is a monk, and he decides that he wants to change his vocation and become a tea monk, and he basically gets this little wagon and he goes from town to town, and he brews tea for the villagers, listens to their problems, and he hopes that he'll find purpose in this job. And while he enjoys it, he becomes the best tea monk in the land. It isn't quite enough for him. He feels like he wants to do something more, and he goes off into the wilderness. Many generations before, the land had robots and they gained sentience, and the humans decided, you can go off and we'll give you this half of the land and you can do what you like there and we won't bother you anymore. And Dex decides to go off into the land where the robots are, and lo and behold, one day a robot comes and asks him what he needs, and this robot is called Moss Cap. And the books are about finding purpose. What is your purpose in life? What do you need? Can you gain satisfaction from what you do? They're just wonderful books. They're cozy and they're heartfelt and they're warm, and I if you haven't read them, they're well worth reading. And A Psalm for the Wild Bill has actually got my favourite quote from any book in it. I'll just read you that quote now. You keep asking why your work is not enough, and I don't know how to answer that, because it is enough to just exist in this world and just marvel at it. You don't need to justify that or earn it. You are allowed to just live. I just think that is such a beautiful way to look at life, that just enjoy it. You are enough and you are good enough to just enjoy life. And again, both 5-star reads from me. Well, that was all the books that I read last month. If you've read any of them or want to read any of them, let me know in the comments. I'd love to talk to you about them. Thank you to everyone who has commented on my previous videos and watched them. I truly do appreciate it. I hope you're all well and enjoying what you're reading. I'll speak to you again soon. Take care. Bye.